I'm Dana K. White. I am the author of Organizing for the Rest of Us, Decluttering at the Speed of Life, and How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. So we're going to talk about decluttering today. That's my specialty. When I say that, I just need to be clear. It's my specialty because I have decluttered so much in my own home. Normally, people who talk about this stuff are like gifted at it. It's something they enjoy. They have been doing this their whole life, and so they thought, I'm going to share with others. Well, I am not that person. I am the person who at one time was completely and totally overwhelmed in my home. I had tried so many times and I had failed so many times that I truly thought I was hopeless. But I dug my way out and I have figured out a lot of things. I've figured things out that work for me as the person to whom this does not come naturally, as the person who gets easily overwhelmed with my stuff. And these things work for everyone in any situation because I needed goals and strategies that were guaranteed to work. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a couple of things that I have found made a huge difference in me actually changing my home. Number one, change your goal. Don't make it your goal to completely and totally declutter your house. Of course, that's what you want, right? But as long as you have that goal, especially if your house has a lot of clutter in it, that goal is so far in the future that it can keep you from getting started. I used to look at my super messy house, and then I would look at pictures of beautifully clean, clutter-free homes, and I would think, that's what I want. I want to go from this to that. There was such a distance there that I never got started. And do you know what the number one thing you need to do to change your home? You need to get started. That's key. So instead of making it your goal to have a perfectly, completely decluttered house, make it your goal to make your house better. Make it your goal to have less in your house. Better and less. Those two goals are the things that changed my home. Focusing on making my space better, focusing on having less in my home, that is what actually got me to the point where my home was truly and completely changed. But as long as I was focusing on a perfect house, I never got going. Okay, so what does that mean to make your goal for your house to be better? Well, it means that you can, right now, while you're watching this video, probably without even getting up, you can throw away some trash that you can see and access from where you are. Maybe you're at your desk. Maybe you have, the wrapper from this morning's breakfast or whatever right there. And there's a trash can over there. You can throw those things away and you have successfully decluttered. You have made your space better. You've gotten started. I know it feels like such a small thing, but here's the beauty of it. If you focus on better, you can't fail if you do anything. I had failed so many times in trying to get my house under control that it made me not want to try anymore. But as long as your goal is better, and you know that you can't fail as long as you do anything, then you do something. And that is what has ultimately changed my home, okay? Focus on having less in this space. Instead of saying, I am going to, this closet that I'm gonna deal with, instead of saying, I am going to make this closet perfect and beautiful and organized, instead say, I'm gonna declutter in here. My goal is just to have less in here than I do right now. That is so freeing, and that allows you to get started. Okay? So make your goals better and less. Those little moments of just giving yourself permission to make a space better, giving yourself permission to feel successful when you get rid of 3 or 4 things, that is going to build upon itself, because you can be successful today at making this space better. And then tomorrow, you're living on that success. That feeling of having been successful and being proud of yourself then makes you ready to make more progress the next day. That is how your home will actually change. That is how my home actually changed. Here is another major shift in how I thought of myself and how I saw my home that really produced big changes in my home. I have, and you have, and everyone has, a clutter threshold. We each have a different clutter threshold. Mine is not the same as yours. Yours is not the same as your mother's. You have a clutter threshold. So what is a clutter threshold? Well, a clutter threshold is the point at which you personally only have in your home what you can easily keep under control, okay? It's the amount of stuff that you personally can easily handle, all right? I am not talking about, sometimes people get confused. I'm not talking about your clutter tolerance, like what drives you crazy. I'm not talking about your aesthetic preferences of what looks good to you, what you prefer to see. I am talking about what can you handle. So I define clutter as anything that consistently gets out of control in my home, okay? So it's different for me and other people. Your clutter threshold is the amount of stuff that you can keep under control. Here's the example that I give. This is how I determined that clutter threshold is a thing. So my mother has given me permission to talk about her. Okay, she actually kind of loves it. But she has a very high clutter threshold. She can handle a lot of stuff. So she grew up on a farm. She grew up with the mentality that you need to go ahead and have the things that you need because we're 30 minutes from town and we're not running into town for every last little thing that you figure out you need. So if something is available, you go ahead and bring it home. If something is cheap, if something's, could be useful, you go ahead and you have it in your home because you'll be so glad that you already have it when you need it. I grew up with that mentality. I honestly kind of thought it was a moral issue. Like if I can go ahead and get this now, I should get this now so that I have it when I need it. But my mom has a high clutter threshold. She can bring in a lot of stuff into her home and she can keep it under control easily. She knows where things are. She can access things. She puts it into all these neat little nooks and crannies and she can find what she needs when she needs it. She can take out 5 or 6 items and then she can get the thing that she needs and then put back the 5 or 6 items so that it's all left neat, She can handle a lot of stuff. I thought that I needed to have everything I could ever need for any future situation, but I have a very low clutter threshold. And that's why my house was completely out of control because I was bringing things in as I found them on sale, as I thought, oh, you know what? I've always thought it would be neat to learn how to knit. So I should probably buy this full complete set of knitting supplies and yarn and everything that I could ever need at this garage sale for $4. I should bring that into my house so that when I decide to knit, it's already there. Like that was my mentality. And yet my house was a disaster because I would bring it in and it would end up in piles and it would end up sometimes ruined at the bottom of a pile. So I had all this stuff, but I couldn't keep it under control because when I go into a space, if I have to move 5 or 6 items in order to get to the thing that I need, I generally move those 5 or 6 items, grab what I need, and go use it. And it never occurs to me to neatly put all that stuff back. Would it be great if I was different? Yes. Would it be great if I always neatly put everything back? Yes, absolutely. And yet, as long as I just wished, I wish I was different. I've got to be different. I'm going to change how I am. My house stayed a disaster. When I said, you know what? That's not how I operate. As much as I wish it was how I operated, I don't do that. That's just not my personality. When I accepted how I actually function and I said, you know what does work for me? Not have as much stuff. So that when I look in the cabinet and I see the thing that I need, I can just reach in there and pull it out and I don't have to move anything first because I have so much less stuff. it works for my personality. That's my clutter threshold. I had to declutter to the point where I could keep my house under control easily. I didn't know that though, right? I was just decluttering. I did not know the power that decluttering would have. I didn't know how much easier my life was going to be with less stuff. I knew I needed to declutter. Okay, my house was crazy, but I didn't know the power that it would have. And so a lot of times people say, well, how do I find my clutter threshold? Well, the bad news is that the only way to find your clutter threshold is to declutter. That's it. That is literally the only way. You can't predict it. There is no quiz for you to find that out. Just know that if your house feels out of control consistently, if your house gets out of control consistently, if your house drives you crazy, you're over your clutter threshold and you need to declutter. Just go ahead, start decluttering. Start getting rid of stuff in your house. Start focusing on less. And as you do that, at some point, you will look around your house and realize, oh, I can do this. I can handle this. This amount of stuff doesn't get out of control easily. And then you have gotten under your clutter threshold. Now, a very tangible way for you to determine if you are under your clutter threshold is the 5-minute pickup. Okay, so if you have ever decluttered a space and then felt like I turned around and 2 weeks later it was back to being completely out of control, ever felt that? That was my complaint, right? It's because you didn't declutter it enough, right? Okay, but the way to consistently keep a space under control after decluttering it is to do a 5-minute pickup. Every day is ideal, almost every day, sometimes 3 times a day, whatever. Do a 5-minute pickup. If you do 5-minute pickups consistently and get to the point where I can get this space on a normal day back under control in 5 minutes, then you know that you're under your clutter threshold. If you really do try the 5 minutes, don't assume, but if you try the 5 minutes, I'm gonna set a timer for 5 minutes, I'm gonna work picking stuff up, putting it away. If you do that and every single day you're still just, no, it doesn't get back under control, then you know you have too much stuff and you need to declutter some more. So use that 5-minute pickup as a way to maintain the progress that you've made, but also as a way to determine, am I under my clutter threshold? Okay. The good news is that your house can be under control easily. Your house does not have to completely morph back into disaster. The bad news is you have to get under your clutter threshold in order for that to actually happen in your house. Okay. One of the biggest mindset changes that I had to make, okay, very similar to the better and less being the goal instead of a completely decluttered house, was that small decisions made and completely acted on change my house more than big ideas that are abandoned halfway through. What? Okay, let me explain. So I have a 5-step decluttering process. If you would like a printable of the 5 steps, you can go to aslobcomesclean.com. That's my website. aslobcomesclean.com/5, F-I-V-E. And you can get a printable of those. They are also in Organizing for the Rest of Us. They are in Decluttering at the Speed of Life. I teach you this 5-step process, okay? The whole process is based on doing things in an order to where I'm making progress and only progress, okay? My goal is to make small decisions and follow through on each small decision so that I never put myself in a situation where I'm worse off than I was before. How many of you, raise your hand, I can't see you, but raise your hand and tell me, have you heard people say on the internet, I know you have, I see memes about it, you know, it has to get worse before it gets better. Usually when people talk about decluttering, they say, well, you know, you always end up with a bigger mess before you can actually make it better. I thought that was the case. I thought that that was how you had to declutter, because that's honestly what a lot of people teach. You have to pull everything out of a space and then only put back what you want. Except that I would pull everything out of a space, look at that completely empty space and go, well, that looks really nice. And then I would turn around and see the huge pile of stuff that was on the ground or on the counter, and then I was completely overwhelmed. Or I would put back some things that I knew needed to be there, and then I would be like, what do I do with the rest of this stuff? So it just did not work for me to do that. So instead, I had to come up with a way to go ahead and get started, even though I felt completely overwhelmed. I could not pull everything out of the space. So how do I make progress? Well, I make small decisions one at a time. The first set of decisions that I make, that's the first step of my decluttering process, is to look for trash. And honestly, this isn't even a decision. Okay, that's the beauty of this step. I'm not having to think. I am not having to analyze. I am literally looking for obvious trash. If I have to think about it, I'm gonna skip that and not make it part of this step. I'm gonna put trash in the trash bag or in the recycling bin if you already have one, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, which means I am immediately having less. I am immediately making this space better, and I am able to make progress without using any emotional energy, because that is the thing that would just drain out of me in the middle of a decluttering project. I would get to something that made me feel lots of feelings. I would feel overwhelmed, and my decluttering energy, my emotional energy was gone. And so then I would step away in the middle of the project, or even if I was going strong, I have kids and somebody would start bleeding, right? And I had to step away. And so I don't do things in that way anymore. Instead, I make small decisions one at a time. So the first one is just putting trash, identifying trash and throwing it away. I've made this space better. Then the next step is easy stuff. Look for anything that doesn't require me to figure anything out. Instead, what has an established home, like I already know where it's supposed to be in my house, but it's not there for whatever reason. We're not gonna analyze why it's not there. How did it end up here? I'm just gonna say, this thing has a home and I'm gonna take it to its home. And I'm gonna take it to its home right now. Because as long as I take it to its home right now, that small decision, which is really not a decision, right? Because it's already easy, I already know where it's supposed to go. I'm acting on it completely right now so that when I get distracted or when my energy is gone, I've only made progress. I've made the space better. It has less in it than it did before. See how it all works together? All right. So as I've taken trash out, as I've gotten easy stuff out, this space that used to be a mass of stuff that overwhelmed me because I knew there were big, important things in there that I was gonna have to do something with, and so I just ignored it because I just couldn't deal with that right now. Instead, I've taken out the trash, no emotions, no decisions. I have taken out the easy stuff, and now there's less stuff in here than there was before. It's less overwhelming to me, okay? I also now know what's inside this space. That is one of my number one decluttering strategies, which feels so simple that it's embarrassing to call it a strategy. And yet it is hugely impactful for me and for so many people who follow these strategies. And that is look. Always look. I have a big imagination and I can dream up what might be in that space, what's probably in that space, what kinds of feelings I'm going to feel when I open that box, how hard it's going to be to deal with that. And so many times that used to just make me not even look. I still have to say, no, Dana, look, always look. Because if I look, then I know what I'm dealing with. And so many times it's nowhere near as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be. But as I've been removing trash, as I've been removing easy stuff, I am looking. I'm not looking at it as a mass anymore. I'm looking at individual items as I look to identify trash and easy stuff. And now, even though I haven't consciously thought about it, I know what is in this space and I am ready to keep going. The third step of my process, I call donations. Sometimes people are like, what does DA stand for? And I'm like, no, it's just the word or the sound that I make when I think, why do I have this? It's duh. Why is this in here? I put this step in here to give myself permission to just remove more stuff. These first three steps, I'm just removing stuff. I am I am getting the excess out of there so that I really am only dealing with the things that I actually have to make decisions about. Donations are things that can go straight in the donate box. By the way, the donate box itself needs to be donatable. This is key. Do not stencil the word donate on the outside of a box because you're going to want to reuse it because it's, it's art now, right? Just grab a box that you already have that can leave your house along with the stuff that's inside of it. Because if I put stuff into the donate box, I'm making a final decision because I'm never going to have to go back through that again. And helping myself make that final decision is key in this process, okay? So I have removed all of the excess so that I can see what I'm really dealing with. And I haven't used any emotional energy. I have not had to analyze anything yet. And this space is significantly better. So even if I decided to quit right now, this space is better. There's less, which means I've been successful. I'm not done, but I have successfully decluttered because there's less in this space than there was when I started, right? Okay. So many times knowing that I can make this space better without using any emotional energy lets me get started. And maybe I do keep going, maybe I don't, and yet it's still better than it was before, okay? All right, the next part, the next step in the 5-step process, step number 4, is to ask my 2 decluttering questions. Now, I have seen lists of questions. They're like 10 questions long to ask yourself about items that you need to declutter. I had way too much stuff in my house to ask myself 10 questions about each and every item. Like, I didn't have the time for that. I needed to get stuff out of my house. So I came up with 2 questions, and if I can answer the first one, I don't even have to ask the second one. These 2 questions will help you make a decision about each and every item in your home. They will help you decide whether you need to let it go or what its home should be. So many people will tell me, but I don't have a home for everything. This is how I came up with the home for everything in my house. I'm trying to smile, y'all. Sometimes I get really intense and I don't want to scare you off because I promise it's easy. So let me smile. Okay, so what are these 2 questions? What are the 2 questions that I ask that don't use any emotions? They just help me deal with the reality of my home and my space. Well, the first question is, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? This is an easy question. It can feel really hard to answer it, but it's an easy question because it's based on instinct. The hardest part is learning to trust your instinct. So I used to look at things and think, where should this go? Where should I put this? Where would I put this? But that's not the question I ask because those questions leave analysis on the table. They let me spin out in thinking through all of the very best ways to do things. I think about where my mom put hers, where my grandma put hers. Where did she keep hers? What does the internet say would be the very best place to keep this item in my home? Call up my friend. Hey, where do you keep your such and such? I couldn't let myself use a question that would let my brain spin out like that, right? So instead, I decided that this question actually works the best and it's something I can answer instantaneously if I will trust my instinct, okay? So the question, where would I look for this first? The key words there are would and first. Would is the instinct. Literally, if you needed this item and you had no idea where it was, because you didn't have an established home for it because it wasn't removed during the easy stuff phase, right? Okay. If you needed this item, where is the first place in your house that you would walk? What's the first drawer that you would open? What's the first cabinet that you would open? Even if you had no confidence it was going to be there, where's the first place where you would go looking for this? It's instinct based. It's not that you're sure it's going to be there. It's literally, where would you look for it first? Does that make sense? And then here's the key. Take it there right now. So the beauty of putting something in the place where you would look for it first even if it doesn't feel right according to where your grandma kept hers. The beauty of that is that when you go looking for it, it's in the first place where you look for it, which is the goal of being organized, right? Is being able to find what you need when you need it. So giving it that home is so much more powerful and is going to take you so much further in this process than if you try to analyze the very best place for something and then can never find it in the future. How many times have you heard people say, or how many times have you said, well, I got organized and now I can't find anything? This solves that, right? Like, this is how you give something a home. It's where would you look for it first? So one example, and I think this was actually the example that the item where I came up with this question, is fingernail clippers. So my fingernail clippers, I was like, where would I look for this first? And I didn't like my answer, because everybody knows fingernail clippers should go in the bathroom drawer, right? Like, that's where they should be. Well, that's where my family would look second after they looked in the kitchen junk drawer. Like, that's the first place where they would look for it. And so I decided to just say, this is how our family functions. I'm going to put this in the first place where we would look for it. And as I started to do that more and more, I started to gain confidence that it was okay to put things in the first place where our family would actually look for it. That's when our house started to change. That's when we started to be able to find and access the things that we needed, which was exactly what I couldn't do when my house was completely out of control, okay? So, but taking it there now does two different things. First of all, this is the strategy that prevents you from making a bigger mess when you declutter. I used to make all these neat little piles, right? Like, I thought it made so much more sense. It was so much more efficient for me to make a pile of things to go to the bathroom, a pile of things to go to the kids' bedroom, a pile of things to go to the garage. And then when I'm done, I will walk through the house and deliver all of these things. That would be the most efficient way. And it would possibly in an ideal world with no interruptions and no distractions and no fleeting decluttering energy or interest. I don't live in an ideal world. I live in a world where things happen. I get distracted. My kids would start bleeding, whatever. I mean, like, I just don't live in a perfect world. And so I was constantly ending up with a space where I had made all these piles of things, and then life would happen. I would step away for a minute or 3 days, and then I would come back, and those individual neat little piles had morphed into one big pile outside the space where I was decluttering anyway. And I couldn't remember exactly what I had decided about them. Was that the stuff for the bathroom? Or was that actually in this pile, or did it get moved over here? And I had to go back through and make all those decisions again. So having those neat little piles feels more efficient, and yet it is not. Taking it there now I will grab anything else that goes to that same general area and deliver it, whatever I can carry in my hands. I'm not going to put it in a box because that's too easy to set aside and then forget about and then find it 6 years later or whatever. But I would take it there now, or I still do. I take it there now. And then when I get distracted, my space is only better than it was before. It's never worse, right? And the goal is better. The space has less in it than it did before, and that's my goal. It's not finished, but it's better. It's a small thing done completely that takes my house so much farther in this process than if I do the big shebang project, pull everything out, and then get distracted in the middle, or make all these neat little piles and then get distracted in the middle, okay? The other thing that happens when I take it there now is it forces me to embrace reality, okay? Let's say that I find fingernail clippers in a random place. The first place where I would look for this is in the kitchen junk drawer, and so I'm gonna take it there now, and I get there and there are 16 pairs of fingernail clippers. As long as I'm just setting it aside and saying, oh yes, yeah, I know where I would look for that first, but I don't take it there right now, I don't know that there are 16 pairs already in that drawer. But if I take it there now, I realize, oh, actually this is a dead donation. This is not something that I need to keep in my house. It can go. Or, oh, I love this pair, and these 3 pairs in here, those can go and I can keep this one. But as long as it's only in theory and not in reality, I'm not making real decisions and actually giving something a home. Sometimes it's not as easy as 1 pair of fingernail clippers and then there are 16 pairs in the drawer. Sometimes it's, I get to the space where I would look for it first and it's its own huge, massive decluttering project. What do I do in that case? Well, as long as I'm taking it there now, I am going to be realistic about this item. And I say, okay, all I have to do is make space for this item. That's all I'm going to do. I am going to remove something, ideally either a piece of trash or a dead donation, because those things are going to go back to the space I was originally decluttering, because that's where my trash bag and my donation box are. So I'm going to remove something to create space for this item. And I'm not going to leave this space any worse than it was before, but my house overall is going to be better, right? Because this has a real actual home. I'm not going to get distracted by this decluttering project, but I just admitted it was a decluttering project, so stuff needs to go. So I'm going to pull something out and give space for that. But it helps me to be realistic, because so many times I'll get there and realize, oh, actually, this isn't worth pulling other things out in order to keep it. I think this thing is actually a dead donation after all. Sometimes it's, okay, I have to take it there now. Yeah, this isn't worth taking it there now. And it turns it into a dead donation. Do you see what I mean? But as long as I'm just setting it aside, putting it in a pile, sticking it in a box, I'm not actually making a real decision followed all the way through. And remember, small decisions made completely are the thing that changed my house. So much more than big dramatic projects abandoned partway through, okay? All right, so I gave you my first decluttering question, the key to that being to take it there now, act on this decision. What if you can't answer that first decluttering question? Well, if you can't answer it, that's when you ask the second decluttering question, which is, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? Because I didn't have a place where I would go looking for it, right? Like if I couldn't answer that question, where would I look for this first? It's because I wouldn't go looking for it, which means if I needed it, it wouldn't occur to me to go looking for it. I would go out and buy another one, or I would do without. Both of those are valid options. But the reality is, if I'm not decluttering this space right now, I would go out and buy another one because I didn't know that I had it, and then I would have 2 in this space. So I have to make a decision. Am I going to let go of this item because I know that I never would have gone looking for it? It's hard. Y'all, it's hard because now I know that I had it. But the reality is I am going to place the value on this space being decluttered. Maybe it would cost me $5 to have to replace this item. Is it worth $5 to me for this space to be decluttered between now and this hypothetical point in the future when I might end up needing this item? I place that $5 value on a decluttered functional space, okay? But if you insist, oh, I knew I had it. Okay, if you knew that you had it, then you have to have an answer to the first decluttering question. If you knew that you had it, where is the first place that you would tear apart looking for it? What's the first drawer that you would open? The first shelf that you would walk to? You have to have an answer to that first one if you knew that you had it. So if you insist that you did know that you had it, if it would occur to you to go looking for it, go back to question number 1 and go with your instinct, okay? All right, but let's talk real quick about the 5th step of the decluttering process. This is the final step. It's the step that kind of gets it organized, but we're still just decluttering, okay? We're just focusing on decluttering as opposed to organizing. This is the step that I call make it fit. Now, just to be clear, I am not talking about shoving everything in and then using your body weight to close the door. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? Instead, I am talking about embracing the reality of the space that you have. This is the step where you implement the container concept. Now, the super brief version of this game-changing concept is that containers are not for putting things in. That's what I always thought they were. Instead, they are meant to serve as limits. I realized one day that contain, like serve as a limit, Create a boundary. That is the purpose of a container. I used to fill up one container and still have stuff left over, and so I went out and bought another container. And then I bought another container. Then I went to put those containers on my shelf, and they wouldn't all fit on the shelf. And so I would buy another shelf. And that was why my house was a disaster. And I didn't realize that that was the problem. I thought organized people love containers. I'm going to buy a lot of containers, stick my stuff in it. And my house never looked the way that I thought it would look when I bought those containers. I wasn't using them correctly. Containers are meant to serve as limits. When I realized that, I realized, okay, not only the bucket that I'm putting something in is the container, the shelf that I'm putting those buckets on, that's a container too. The room that holds the shelf, it's a limit. It's a container. My whole house is the limit. It determines how much stuff I can have. I may want more stuff, but the reality is if I try to fit more stuff into my home, into my space, then it actually will fit usably and get to-ably. There is no hope of my house ever being under control. Just like firefighters work to contain a fire, they create a boundary. They do that because if the fire goes outside of that boundary, things get out of control, right? If I can keep things within the container, if I can let the container make the hard decisions and say, I'm going to put my favorite things in first, and whatever doesn't fit has to go. Even though I like it, even though it has value, I'm going to let it go. If I will look at things that way, that's when I can keep my house under control, okay? So how does this apply in the actual 5-step process? The first part of this step is to consolidate, put like items together. Just doing that is gonna reveal some donations, right? Like just touching, oh, I need to put all of the egg turners together will often help you realize, oh, I cannot stand this egg turner. You know why? Because the handle is heavy and it flips onto the floor every single time I set it on the edge of the pan. Okay, so it just reveals that because you're touching each item as you put like items together. Okay, but you're not making big decisions, you're not using emotional energy, but you're just doing that action and that reveals it. Once things are together, it will often help you realize, oh, maybe I don't need 7 skillets. Maybe I only need 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, but whatever. I probably don't need 7, but just having them all together helps me realize that and makes it easy and turns things into donations, okay? But the final part of this step is to embrace the realities of the space, which means I am now down to the point where I only have in this space things that I would look for first in here. And then I would actually go looking for in my house. And yet, if I try to keep too many of those things, I can't keep my house under control. I have to declutter my least favorites until I only have what will fit easily, what's easy to access, what I can get to easily in this space and keep it under control. So I'm embracing the realities of the space. I'm letting the space make those hard decisions, and I'm going with my clutter threshold. Okay, what does accessibility mean to me as opposed to my mom? What does get to ability mean to me as opposed to how my mom would operate? Make sense? So all of these things together are the things that are going to change your home. Focus on less. Focus on making your house better. You can do that immediately. You can start, and if you work for 30 seconds, your house will be better. You'll still have a long way to go, but that's okay, right? You got to take that first step. So focus on better. Focus on having less in your house than you did before. Remember that you have a clutter threshold. Stop fighting your clutter threshold and instead declutter until you find it. Doesn't the sound of a house that just easily stays under control, doesn't that just sound lovely to you? Isn't that the goal, right? And then acknowledge that small tasks done completely will change my house more than big shebang projects and ideas that I abandon halfway through. Focus on those small things. Each step in the decluttering process, each step in my 5-step process will help you make progress. You can go out of order if you want. Each step will produce progress and only progress because it's small things done completely as opposed to big shebang projects that you get tired and abandon. Okay? All right. I hope this has been fun. I have enjoyed so much getting to talk with you today. All of these concepts, all of these mindset changes, practical steps applied to real life homes, they're in my books. Organizing for the Rest of Us, Decluttering at the Speed of Life, and How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. Again, I'm Dana K. White, and I have so enjoyed our time together. Thank you.